And what I want to say, I'll say it now and I'll say it at the end, is what a house is built on may seem insignificant until the storm breaks. What a house is built on may seem insignificant until the storm breaks. I have been in leadership in some form or another in this church for many, many years. And one thing that I can put my money on if I wanted to is that everyone seems to have an idea and an opinion about how church should be done. Everyone has their thoughts about what the priorities should be, what shouldn't be the priorities, where we should be going, where we shouldn't be going. Everyone, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people have opinions, and not everyone has the same opinion. And after all of these years of being in leadership, in ministry or in church leadership, I am now at the point where there is only one thing I'm interested in, and that is that we build according to the patterns that we find in here. I have no other interest. You're welcome to tell me your opinions or your thoughts, but this is what I'm concerned about more than anything. And today I want to show you a picture of the early church operating under the ministry of the great apostle, who is Yeshua. And secondly, under the 12 men appointed by Yeshua as his apostolic representatives on the earth. In the book of Acts, a book we're all familiar with, I'm sure, we read that a religious storm or a religious tsunami broke out over Jerusalem. And the resulting waves swept believers far and wide into Judea, Samaria, and beyond. However, the newly filled Holy Spirit apostles stayed put in Jerusalem right at the center of the storm. And they not only held firm and stood strong, but in the face of extreme persecution, began to build what we now see in the earth, a spiritual phenomenon, a building, a house that still stands today, centuries later. Yes, the church was established, and over the centuries it multiplied and it grew as Yeshua, the master craftsman, built his church in the earth. This church promoted one faith, one doctrine, one immersion, not a new creation, but an extension of an old one with a new look about it. Jew and Gentile joined together, having the same Father above all and in all, a God who was directing his affairs on the earth, initially through his Son, and then later through his Holy Spirit. This church that I'm talking about today, the church, was built, yes, on the foundation of the apostles and prophets. It's what we heard yesterday. And there was no religious or political storm that could withstand the strength and the power of the spiritual house being built on the rock, with Yeshua himself being the chief cornerstone. Today, we are possibly on the edge of another world spiritual tsunami. We don't really know what the coronavirus explosion meant or even means. Many people have their theories, I know. And we don't really know what the events surrounding Eastern Europe right now possibly might mean. And I'm not interested in conspiracy theories in the slightest. But I will say this, that my personal belief is that what has been taking place in our earth in the last 2 years is going to be a gateway to something far more serious, far more sinister, something that will bring the church into direct opposition and persecution, something that will escalate and transpire at some point into the emergence of an anti-Messiah in this earth, whereby many will give allegiance to this anti-Messiah. We know that the love of many will grow cold. Yeshua himself said that. And I will say again, what a house or what a church is built on may seem insignificant until the storm breaks. We heard in our first sermon yesterday that this congregation has been for decades built on the understanding that the apostles and the prophets are the foundations of the building or the church. But I'd like to say it's the other gifts that we read of in the New Testament, many other gifts, that make this house, this church, a beautiful building. Together, it is made into a bride fit for her groom. But we must remember who it is that's doing the building. It's Yeshua himself, the wise master builder, who is building his church in the earth, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. I believe in these last days across every nation, Yahweh is preparing and about to unleash men and women who will lead the way through this inevitable darkness, soon to cover this nation and this earth. Spiritual persecution will come against the church. Do you know that? Churches will close their doors because of the persecution. And I am saying today it's going to be important to recognize these men and women about to be unleashed in the earth. And we need to draw in close to them. With that in mind, I want us today to identify the marks of an apostle. At a marked time in eternity, at the commission of the Father, Yeshua, the apostle and great high priest of our faith, was sent from heaven, and he walked into the pages of earth's history, calling men and women to himself. Throughout the land of Israel, this divinity come to earth didn't just saunter along the footpaths of Israel as some of our modern pictures give to us. But this man, this one, he walked with absolute purpose, intent and meaning along the shores of Galilee into Israel's villages, towns and cities, calling men to come and follow me. He invited men and women to become part of a heavenly kingdom that was soon to fill the earth. And in particular, he called out to 12 men. And these 12 left all and became his spiritual sons. The next few years we were to see the first tentative steps of these sons learning about life in the kingdom, with all the experiences, good and bad, that mark a newborn child. Yeshua began to instruct them about the principles of kingdom life, about true discipleship, about what it really means to leave all and to follow him into the future and into the unknown. Who would dare have the courage and tenacity to drop everything they had known and follow this stranger unless something within them stirred? Unless something within them stirred so deeply that they had no choice. This was not some spiritual fanatic who had come along, but this one was someone who spoke with an authority they'd never heard before. He said things they'd never heard before. And I ask you today, my friend, has this same one walked into your life and stirred the recesses of your heart? Has something within you compelled you to follow him into the unknown future that awaits you? May Yahweh bless and help you. Because this future I'm talking about is both scary and exciting. And if you don't know this feeling, or you've never known it, I'm suggesting that you're living far too comfortably. True discipleship costs and demands. These 12 men began to share their lives with each other. And more importantly, they shared their lives with him. This was an intimate, manly relationship. And from this small company of 13 men, one of whom was divinity, apostolic community was birthed and began to take shape in the earth. These 12, one of whom was to be replaced, were soon to be sent to the nations. But not yet. Not for 3 years, to be precise. But something incredible was stirring in Israel that made the common man and woman sit up and take notice. And on the back of this incredible and unprecedented interaction between heaven and earth, it was easy for the Holy Spirit to come in all of his fullness and lead believers into a community lifestyle after the day of Pentecost. The followers of the way, as they were known then, gladly gave up all. They sold out for the kingdom. They lay everything down at the feet of the apostles, who then, with the support of deacons, distributed according to the need that existed. Jerusalem was awash with men and women who were desperate to learn all they could about kingdom life, being led by the Holy Spirit and working to the drumbeat of the apostles. Ultimately, after the gospel had gone to the Gentiles, we see apostolic order being laid down in the main by Peter and Paul throughout the churches that were springing up across Asia Asia Minor and Europe. Through these glorious, precious years, stretching from the moment Yeshua walked into the lives of these men until the day that the Great Commission began to take shape in the earth, these apostles learned some very important lessons along the way. Apostolic principles to be transferred from generation to generation, but principles also of church ministry, which, if followed, provided the springboard for the gospel to be shared, for disciples to be nurtured and trained, and for ministries to be unleashed across the nations. So what were some of those lessons of apostleship? In order to answer this question, I want to just spend a short time on 3 points that mark the ministry of apostle. But I will also say here that whatever I say about the marks of an apostle can in some way be applied to every ministry gift. So no one is excluded. I want to just touch on apostolic calling, apostolic authority, and apostolic relationship.